Hi everyone, my name's Jeff Dean and I'm Math Dad. I'm here to help you help your kids understand math. Today, I'm coming to you with a challenge. See, we've been talking about things to do or not to do when helping our kids with math. For example, the first thing that we talked about was the fact that kids can smell fear, which means they pick up on how you feel about math. So it's important not to sit there and say, oh man, I hate math, or I was never good at math, because they're going to pick up on that and they may start taking on that same problem. We've also talked about not focusing on the little mistakes, but looking at the big picture and looking at the overall understanding and not nitpick every little mistake, but looking for the things that our kids are doing right. We've also talked about how doing things faster isn't always better. Sometimes it's good to take our time and really break things down and develop a good understanding of math. We've also talked about the importance of knowing who's holding the pencil, because the person holding the pencil is probably the person doing the thinking, which means they're probably the person doing the learning. And then the other thing that we've talked about up to this point is that memorizing isn't always understanding. Sometimes memorizing means you understand, but sometimes memorizing just means that you have some facts, and if you can't remember it, you're stuck and you can't do it. And you can look back at some of my previous videos to get a lot of details on those 5 things. But today, here's the challenge. One question that I hear more than any other question when I'm talking to people about what they've learned in math is this: where am I ever going to use this? And believe it or not, that is a huge roadblock. Because if we can't find relevance in what we're learning, it makes learning sometimes difficult. So the challenge is this: if you're asking, where am I going to use this? Why not take that on with your kids to do some research and find out where something might be used? Or better yet, especially if your kids are older, if you know what your kids are interested in doing in the future, look up what type of math they might need to be able to be successful at that. Here's a story that happened when I was teaching an Algebra 2 class. I was working on some complex algebra, and I had a student come up to me and say, Mr. Dean, I don't think I should have to learn this. And I was like, why don't you think you need to learn this? Because I'm going to be an interior designer when I grow up, and I don't need this math to do that. And I asked, are you sure? How do you know? Have you done some research to determine what math you need? And the student said, no, I just know that I don't need math because it's interior design. So I took a few moments and I went to the computer and I looked up just real quick search and said, what math is required to be an interior designer? And you want to know what? The first thing on the list was the exact topic that we were learning about that day. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that student did with that information when I shared it, because I just kind of gave them a printout of here's the math that you need to know and kind of highlighted some of the things that we were working on. But what it really showed me is that a lot of times we ask the question, where is it going to be used? Because we really don't know. Many people don't know what math they're going to need to do what they want to do. They just assume sometimes that, well, I'm just going to do this. And I don't think there's any math, therefore I'm going to assume that there isn't. But a lot of times we will use math that we're not even aware of right now that we need. And if nothing else, sometimes we need to learn this math so that we can get to do the things that we want to do. But here's another story, and this one happened very recently. It was recently meeting with a neuropsychologist, and he was talking about some fascinating things about vision field. In other words, how much of a field of vision people have. And when he found out that I was a math teacher, he goes, oh, since you're a math teacher, I'll share this interesting piece of information. You see, he was testing somebody, and he found out that they only had 97-degree vision field, just 7 degrees past 90-degree angles. And when he told me how he figured this out, it was fascinating. He said that from about a foot away, they only had about 1.5 inches to the left of center of vision. And to figure out the 97 degrees, he said, you want to know what I had to do? And it was the first time that I ever had to use this math since I was in high school. He said, I had to use trigonometry. And he showed me his work. He showed me some of the things that he had written down to remember what he had learned in trigonometry. And he used that math to figure out the vision field of one of his patients. The thing that I think is amazing about that is here you have someone, a neuropsychologist, who's probably done all kinds of schooling to get to where he is. And when he was in high school, he may have been thinking, why do I have to learn trigonometry? When will I ever need this? He may not have ever thought that he would need trigonometry. But lo and behold, here we are, 15, 20 years later after high school, maybe even longer, I didn't ask. And that skill had to be used to do his job. He didn't know that he was going to need that as he was starting to study that, but it was something he paid attention to. It's something that he worked at, and he needed it. And he was able to do everything, and it was amazing. I thought it was a great story of exactly what I'm talking about. We don't always know what we're going to need, but I really think that we might change our perspective a little bit if we actually tried to figure those things out. When you're working on a topic of math with your students and they ask, Dad, why do I have to learn this? Where will I ever use this? Take the time instead of, I don't know, son. I don't think you'll ever need math. I don't need math in my job. Instead of those types of statements, say, you know what? I don't know, son. Let's look it up. Let's go online and let's type it in and let's see, where is this math used? And maybe you'll find out that, you know what, it's just a stepping stone to a bigger piece of math that you might need later. But you might be surprised that it's something that people use all the time. Most of the time when I talk to friends of mine who ask about math, or they say things like, oh, I've never used math in my life, when we really start talking, it's not that they never use math. It's that sometimes they don't think about what they're doing as some of the math that they've learned. They're not sitting there solving an equation for X, but the thinking that they use to solve an equation for X are things that are going on in their head. So they are using it. It might just look a little bit different. I think about sometimes some of the things that I had to do when I was taking English courses, or when I was taking history courses, or I was taking science courses. There's so much that I've done in those classes that I can't think of doing those on a regular basis. I remember doing things like diagramming sentences, and we had to draw little pictures, little lines of where certain words and parts of the sentence goes. And I've never done that in my job, but the understanding of how sentence structure works are things that I've used, especially to help my kids understand what they're looking at. Or I think about things that I've learned in a biology class. I'm a math teacher. I don't use a lot of things that I learned in a biology class in my career, but I ended up living at a house with lots of animals and lots of things that we're dealing with, and some of the knowledge that I gained in biology, I use from time to time. Didn't think I was going to need it because I thought I was going to go into math and not science, but it turns out that I do use it from time to time. Maybe not to the extent that I learned it in class, but that general knowledge of science and math and English and social studies and history, all of those things become important parts that shape who we are and how we think and how we solve problems. So the challenge, when you hear that question, or when you're thinking it yourself, when will I ever use this? Take on the challenge, look it up, make it a project with your kids and say, let's find out where it's used. And maybe you'll find something really amazing and open some doors that maybe you didn't know existed. So that's it. That's your challenge. I'm Jeff Dean, and I'm Math Dad.